Good morning. My name is Taylor Randall. I'm Dean of the David Eccles School of Business, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this installment of Navigating COVID-19. We're coming to you today from the Mariner S. Eccles Institute for Economics at the University of Utah. Mariner Eccles was a key economic figure in the history of the United States. He was head of the Federal Reserve and led our country out of the Great Depression. We're pleased to be providing these webinars thanks to a generous grant from the George S. and Dolores Dory Eccles Foundation. What you'll hear today is an intellectual collaboration between the faculty here at the Institute, Levitt, the Levitt Partners, and the Cynosure Group. Today, we're talking about the state government's role and the state government's leadership in bringing about an economic recovery. I'm pleased to introduce to you former governor of the state of Utah and former Health and Human Services Secretary, Mike Levitt.
Well, thank you, Taylor, and greetings, everyone. As the Dean suggests, today's program includes leaders from state government. It includes experts on our state budget and people who are knowledgeable about our state's economy. This series has been focused primarily on business impacts of a public health crisis. State government is one of Utah's largest employers, and it has been impacted in this crisis. State government, like businesses all over Utah, face a revenue challenge. Sales tax revenues have plummeted. The state legislature faces a daunting challenge of cutting approximately $800 million to $1.5 billion from the state budget in some special sessions that they're going to be holding in June or early July. Making matters even worse in these economic times, the demand for government services is going up. Businesses demand on government to pay unemployment insurance. Residents have health and human service needs. There's going to be more demand on education and public safety, and this just isn't going away right away. Today on the program, we're going to answer the question: how will budget reduction and the new priorities by state government impact the state of Utah's economy, and how will it affect your business? We have a great panel of experts today to share their unique insights with you. We have representatives of both political parties. We'll have a representative of rural Utah, and we'll talk about the impacts of COVID-19 statewide. Now, I'd like to start with the state's fiscal analyst, Jonathan Ball. Jonathan advises legislators today, and he's here to advise us. So welcome, Jonathan, to this program. I'm going to turn the time to you to share the state's budget realities, and we'll have a visit after. Jonathan?
Thank you, Governor Levitt, and thank you, Dean Randall and the Eccles family for making this event possible. I'm honored to be part of it. As Governor Levitt said, I'm going to try to set the stage a little bit for today's discussion by talking about the economy, the state's economy, and its impact on the state budget, and probably most importantly, how we plan to manage those impacts. So let's start with the economy, and I'd like to do that by showing you some slides. So if we could pull up the first slide. This is not something I need to demonstrate to everyone. All of your listeners, Governor Levitt, they're living this, but it's interesting to see. This is Utah initial unemployment claims for each week, starting in February and then ending in June. And you can see the yellowish gold bars here. That's last year. That's what initial unemployment claims looked like last year. Those teal colored bars, that's this year. That's what happened. That's what people are living and feeling every day. And that is an incredible spike in unemployment claims. That's 33,000 at its peak in April. Just to give you some context about that, these claims they're thankfully trending downward, but they have trended down to the highest point in the Great Recession. So that last bar on the teal colored one is the highest point during the Great Recession. So this is a pretty significant impact on our economy. And these two indicators I'm talking about today, these are leading indicators. We're hoping to get much more data. As you know, Governor, there's a lag between government data and what actual people are living. But the next slide, if we could go to that one, this is another sort of leading indicator for what's happening in our economy right now and what people are feeling and living. This is taxable sales in Utah. And you can see, first of all, the overall taxable sales have declined by 0.4% this March versus last March. That's significant because we expected these to grow, and they have been growing for a decade. Now they're declining. I think what's more interesting about this chart actually is the shift in consumption patterns. So those bars that are above the line, those are increases in taxable sales, and the bars below the line are decreases in taxable sales. And as you might expect, if you're in the grocery business or the home and garden business, you're doing well. If you're selling cars or hotel rooms or a restaurateur, you're not doing so well. And why this is significant for the state budget is because we have differential rates, lower rates on the things that are rising and higher rates on the things that are declining in this graph. So if we go to the next slide, let me just talk a little bit about why this is important for the budget. So this is our current year state budget, about $18.5 billion. And
Jonathan, I think we have, at least I have lost, I'm not able to hear you, and maybe I'm the only one, but I'm taking the chance to say we're having trouble hearing you. So, Jonathan, given the technical difficulties here for a minute, I'm going to just put pause on what is a very important underpinning for all of this, and I'm going to see, we'll move on in our program and then come back when we have a solution for that. I want to introduce a very important person in rural Utah. In fact, if you were to ask who is it that knows rural Utah better than anyone else, one person, I think you'd have to say it's Wes Curtis. Wes is a rural economic development professional, and he also advises the Kem Gardner Policy Institute. I must disclose that I'm biased a bit about Wes because we worked together for many years as he directed rural policy. But Wes, we're really anxious to learn from you the opportunities and the challenges that this creates in rural Utah as we go through this struggle on COVID-19.
Thank you, Governor Levitt. And because rural economies are much different than urban economies, I thought it'd be good to give you just a quick background of what's going on and how the pandemic is affecting rural communities. First, the good news. The good news is, with the exception of San Juan County, rural counties have very low reported cases of the COVID virus. In fact, Carbon County has had 8 cases, Grand County 10, Emory County 5, Richfield 6. So they've been very fortunate in this regard. That's the good news. Unfortunately, there is still plenty to be concerned about. 3 of rural Utah's foundational mainstays in the economy have been hit very hard by the pandemic. And these include tourism, oil and gas production, and certain sectors of agriculture. In agriculture, 50% of Utah's products go to such things as restaurants and school lunch programs. Because of the shutdown, these farmers have lost their market and have had to dump milk and plow under their crops. And they only get 1 shot a year, most of these people, at being successful. In the oil and gas industry, as you know, it's been hit very hard. In fact, at one point, prices on oil hit negative territory. And it's especially hitting local governments hard in these counties that produce oil and gas. And that's because the federal government has reduced its mineral lease royalty payments from 12.5% to 2.5% in an attempt to help drilling companies through this struggle. But many of the counties, especially in the Uinta Basin, rely on these mineral lease royalties to pay for basic government services such as healthcare and transportation and fire protection. So they are very concerned right now. And tourism is probably the hardest hit of all. Jonathan mentioned the unemployment claims. The highest claims are coming from the tourism dependent counties. Garfield County has had 16% of its workforce file for unemployment insurance, and Grand County has had 22% of its workforce file for unemployment insurance. I spoke to Lance Syrett the other day, who is the general manager of the Ruby's Inn properties at Bryce Canyon National Park. And he tells me that occupancy rates for the month of April this year are down 94% from what they were a year ago. And on top of that, the room rates are also down, in some cases only a third of what they might have been under normal circumstances. And this impacts not just Garfield County, but also impacts state coffers. Last April, Ruby's Inn paid $180,000 in transient room taxes. This year, instead of $180,000, they paid $4,000 in transient room taxes. So with that bleak background, let me shift and talk about some opportunities that might present themselves going forward. I asked Lance if he could see any silver linings in what's going on. And he said they had a good Memorial Day weekend, but the thing that was interesting is almost all the cars in the parking lot had Utah license plates. In fact, he said that many Europeans have told him they've come to Bryce Canyon several different times. Over the weekend, he'd heard Utahns tell him they were there for the first time. So this is potentially opening up some new markets. And in fact, I really believe that we're seeing an increase in demand for outdoor recreation. With movies and concerts no longer viable entertainment options, people are discovering the value of outdoor recreation. And Utah needs to double down on its status as a national leader in developing outdoor recreation opportunities. And the trend that I think is most intriguing is that of remote work. As everyone knows, people are working from home these days, and companies are finding that this is a viable and cost-saving way of doing business. At the same time, a recent survey showed that many people in major cities are concerned about population density and have a desire to leave the cities. This move to remote work, coupled with what could be some level of urban flight, could turn into a real opportunity for rural communities. And I would encourage the state to help rural Utah position itself to take advantage of this opportunity and develop the infrastructure and support networks that are needed with such things as technology and innovation centers and co-working spaces. And also, we need to make sure everybody knows that the majority of rural Utah communities have broadband capacity that is equal to or better than what you find in the urban areas. In fact, in many rural communities, you can get fiber to the home and to the business without any problems. Lastly, I think this is fortuitous. The legislature in this last session passed SB 95, which appropriates $8 million for rural economic opportunity development. I know there are deep budget cuts coming, but this appropriation, if strategically applied, could be the catalyst to positioning rural Utah for the future and the key to rural's economic recovery.
Wes, I'm delighted to know that thoughts being given on this potential of flight from urban to rural. I mean, many years ago, as the internet was being developed, you could see the vision of that, and there was evidence it could happen, but the bandwidth was missing, and now it sounds like it's not. Are you seeing early signs, first of all, that people are interested in this, and are local officials in these areas embracing it and looking for ways to develop?
The good news is, and this is anecdotal, but I talked to an economic development director in Uinta County. She said they're already seeing, they've seen several families move to the area just to escape the city. And they are making plans with SB 95 money to put together an innovation center and bring that technology and worker support to their county. So yes, I think people are starting to recognize the opportunity. and we need to do all we can to encourage and support that.
Well, let's say to everyone listening today, if you need a break and you need a place to go, rural Utah is the place. We need to support them. We want rural Utah to be part of the economic miracle that Utah is and will be and will continue to be. So thank you very much for all that you do, Wes, and we appreciate you coming today. We're going to give this another try and see if Jonathan's technical difficulty has been resolved. Jonathan, how are we doing? Are you able to hear us and talk to us?
Can you hear me, Governor? I try a different approach.
Yeah, that's very good news. I can. We're anxious to hear the rest of what you have to say. Go ahead, proceed.
Great. Sorry about that. Obviously, budget cuts already impacting the technology at the state capitol, so my apologies. I was saying that as unemployment claims rise, basically that impacts income taxes, and income taxes drive the second largest share of our budget revenue, the education fund, as shown on this chart. And of course, as that slice falls, so does the size of the pie. And those taxable sales are important to the general fund, the third piece, the third largest slice of this pie. So, as you mentioned, Governor, at the beginning, precisely at the time when demand for government increases, revenue to government decreases. And so that's our challenge. That's what we have to manage. If you could go to the next slide, I'll show you exactly by how much we think it is decreasing. So this is state revenue to the general education fund, and on the left-hand side, the general fund, the gold bar, that's kind of what we're expecting. When we budgeted back in February, we were expecting that revenue would increase overall, both general and education, by 6.7%. Well, since then, two things have happened. One is we've delayed the filing date for income taxes, and that's pushed a bunch of revenue out of the current year and into next year, and that's why those education fund bars go down. But the yellow bars, those represent what we would expect to happen without any economic impacts. And you can see on the other colored bars that I'm thinking those are teal or purple. I'm colorblind, so just bear with me. Whatever the ones on the right, that's what's actually happening right now. So these are collections through Tuesday of this week, and you can see obviously that those collections are not keeping up with our expectations, and the income tax collections are actually less than we were anticipating they would be as well. So what does that mean for the next 2 years? That's on the right-hand side of this chart, of this slide. We've run two scenarios, Governor, to try to figure this out. And as I mentioned before, we're at the beginning of this and beginning of collecting data on this, and there's a little bit of a lag for us. But based on the information that we have, the best information we have, we're expecting best case scenario, we will have a state government budget deficit of $200 million this year and $600 million next year. Worst case scenario right now, we would have a state government budget deficit of $600 million this year and $1.3 billion next year. If we go to the next slide. All right, well, that's the bad news. What's the good news? The good news is that about 8 years ago, a ambitious freshman legislator came to my office and asked, Jonathan, when did you know that we were in the Great Recession? And I told the story about how in August of 2008, I was vacationing at Denali National Park, and Andrew Wilka, my chief economist, called me up and said I need to come home. And so that's when I did. And this legislator said, I knew a year before you did in my business. And then he said, what did you do to survive the Great Recession in state government? And I said, well, we do what we always do. Working for legislators, that's like keeping jackrabbits on a flatbed trailer. We made it up as we went along. And he said, well, I think we need a plan. So we went about a number of steps to create, first of all, early warning signals to know when things were going to go sideways, but also to create some contingencies. And that's what this slide is. This this is our plan. This is Utah's fiscal toolkit, and it's based on experience. So what did we do the last 2 times? And we're executing on that plan already, Governor Levitt, and I think that's good news for business in Utah and for citizens in Utah. If you could advance to the next thing, you'll see basically in the third special session. Well, this one was actually in general session. In general session, we started preparing through House Bill 3 by basically creating a little bit of buffer, not spending money that we didn't think we're going to get. Then during the next, if you could advance one more, please, or actually go ahead and advance all 3. During the third special session, we had several bills that, first of all, took care of that timing delay with cash flow, the filing timing delay. They, second of all, basically said, hey, we're going to have to cut budgets. And thirdly, they capped the working rainy day fund by allowing the state to go out and borrow some money at very favorable rates and use that money to build infrastructure and free up cash to fill budget holes. Part of this plan is obviously spending reductions, and that's tough, but it's just part of the plan, and it's necessary. It's something that we have to do, and it's actually a really good time for us to reevaluate what state government is prioritizing funding on. It allows us to make more strategic investments, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean devastation to the budget. It can mean better decisions because people have different motivations. So we'll keep working on the plan. You can see spending reductions is only the third step. We've got 4 more to go, and we plan to keep executing as we go forward. Then the final slide that I have for you today, Governor Levitt, there we go. This basically just shows you for 5 years, one of those early warning and contingency plan items that young legislator came up with was stress testing. For 5 years, Utah has been stress testing its budget, much like large banks stress test their balance sheets, and have been doing since the Great Recession. The left side of this chart shows our value at risk. The top part of that, as you mentioned, Governor Levitt, that's increased spending from increased demand. The bottom part, that's lost revenue. So our value at risk is about $3 billion over the next 5 years. But we've got an inventory of buffers that well exceeds the risk. And getting up into the top 2 buffers is pretty hard, but we actually have enough easy access and moderately easy to access buffers that we can make it through this thing if we make some wise choices, if we prioritize properly. And we've got to take our time and be measured about it. We can't spend everything, can't spend all the buffers at once. We just need to keep executing on a plan. So that's what we're going to do. And I feel pretty confident that we'll do it well. So thanks very much for having me. Sorry about the technical difficulties. By the way, you're going to hear from that young freshman legislator at the end of this program.
Indeed. Jonathan, another legislator who would be known to many who are participating, then to become governor, Olene Walker, created through legislation the Rainy Day Fund for Utah. Now, I've been through a few of these pinches myself, and I can actually just hear people who are concerned about the budget cuts looking at that amount in the Rainy Day Fund and saying, look, if this isn't a rainy day, when will we ever have one? How do you respond to that? I'm sure you're going to hear it, and you probably already have.
Yes. So Governor, absolutely. And the Rainy Day Fund, I don't think anybody's saying is that the Rainy Day Funds are off the table right now. They're not. They're maybe further down the buffet. I guess that's not a great analogy in the pandemic, but anyway, they're on the table somewhere. They're just further down, and we need to use this opportunity to at least. There's a willingness, there's a political will right now to examine government spending like there hasn't been for the past decade. We want to take advantage of that, make sure that we are making the right investment decisions for the long term. And then we can look at the Rainy Day Fund and think, okay, what can't we live without? And that's when we'll go get money from the rainy day fund to pay for the things that we can't live without for the next 5 years.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for coming home and playing this very important role. Over the course of history, Utah's had some very capable fiscal analysts. It's a role that not many people know its importance. I want you to know I do, and I appreciate it very much. Okay, we'd like to go on now and talk to Representative Angela Romeo. Angela, we're very pleased that you're able to be here. Assistant Minority Whip in the Utah Legislature. And I'm delighted to make this introduction. You're going to be able to give us a sense of the bipartisan view of all of this. Most importantly, I think you're on the Executive Appropriations Committee. And so talk with us a little bit about your experiences and how are we going to get through this?
Well, you know, this is tough for all of us, but I wanted to let Wes know I was one of those Utah families that went down to Kanab and hung out with my colleague, Representative Noel. People think that's a strange relationship, but it's a good friend of mine for the weekend, and we hiked Bryce Canyon. But the biggest concern for us as the House Democrats is really ensuring funding for public education and also looking at the essentials for social services in our vulnerable populations. And we're experiencing this now with COVID-19. Many of the young people who live in my district don't have access to technology. And so we're seeing the impact already. And so Senator Escamilla and I got together and we thought, let's be proactive versus reactive. And we had seen how communities of color and individuals that were working poor, who were living in cities, who are essential workers, were being impacted by COVID-19. And so we partnered up with members from the majority party, and we got some funding through the CARES Act to start the COVID Community Partnership. And so through that partnership, we're testing individuals within the city, making sure that if they test positive, we get them access to housing security and food security. And so this is something Senator Escamilla and I have been doing with our executive branch, working with Kristen Cox. Also, we're meeting with Dr. Dunn later on today. We've also incorporated county government. We're working with Mayor Wilson and her staff to provide that food security by partnering with the food bank. And we're also working with the city on the food security pieces. And how does this relate to business? Well, these people that are being impacted are essential workers. And so we have to ensure that we're protecting them, but we're also ensuring that we're protecting our local and small businesses. Many of these businesses rely on their workers. And so many times, some of us are privileged enough to be able to sit in our homes and work from home, but there are a lot of people that can't telecommute. And I represent a lot of those individuals, and there are many families who are already struggling. So I think what this COVID-19 provided for many of us was to kind of point out some of the disparities that currently exist in our state. And what we're trying to do is, how do we learn from COVID-19? How do we look at these disparities and how do we move forward? Because if we don't have a quality education, we don't have a robust economy. If we're not taking care of our essential workers, we're not going to flatten that curve, and it's going to impact all of us. And again, the experiences in an urban setting are very different than the experiences in rural Utah, but it comes full circle. How do we ensure that we're protecting all Utahns and we're working together to dismantle some of these disparities that existed before COVID-19, and how do we move forward so we're not leaving anyone behind? And so that's the work we're doing right now.
Well, thank you for that. I'd like you to just spend a few more thoughts on the varying industries and occupations and the racial and ethnic groups and age groups that are experiencing some disproportionate impact. What can we do during this period to assure that we're not just working to make certain the state's economies going forward, but we're meeting the human needs that are required during a time like this?
And that's where Senator Escamilla and I stepped forward. Again, we saw what was going on in New York, and we're like, we need to do something. And as many of you know, Senator Escamilla was the only member of our legislature that tested positive for COVID-19. So she had firsthand experience. And so we approached some members from the majority, Representative Schultz and Senator Stevenson, and said, hey, help us solve this problem because we're seeing higher rates of individuals within Salt Lake City that are testing positive. And so part of the funding that we receive, we are working with the Office of Health and Disparities. And then through that, we've contracted with 16 nonprofits to have community health workers. And these community health workers are trusted members within vulnerable communities as what we consider marginalized communities. And they're reaching out to people. We're doing the testing, but this wouldn't be possible without the partnership with the executive branch, with the Governor Herbert's office and his staff, and without Mayor Wilson's staff, and without Mayor Mendenhall's staff to really tackle this issue. Because if we can flatten that curve, and we can make sure people are safe, and we can make sure that they're not going to lose their home, and we can make sure that their children are fed, it's just going to help us overall as a state, and we'll be able to sustain some of that. Because many of the people I represent are, again, I said the frontline workers, but I also represent part of downtown Salt Lake, and so I've seen the toll there in the service industry when it comes to bars, when it comes to restaurants, and so the people I represent are not only the people that are essential workers, but they're also many of the businesses that have relied on people to come into the city to sustain them. And so I'm seeing them affected by this as well. But I think another thing that we really need to look at is how do we work with the federal government? How do we ensure we work with our congressional delegation to make sure that the HEROES Act it passes, because that will help us sustain a little bit more. I know many in the state don't like to talk about, they like, we're the state of Utah, we can do it on our own, but there's a reason why we're a state within the federal government. And I think it's the role of our congressional delegation to work with us to work through this, to have the funding and the sources we need to make sure that our economy thrives and that we're protecting all Utahns.
Well, thank you. That was a very thoughtful response, and we appreciate you being here today. We're going to now hear from the Speaker of the House, Speaker of the Utah House of Representatives, Brad Wilson. I'd like to just simply say this. I got started hanging out around the legislature pretty early in my life because my father was in the legislature. As a result of that, I think I have known every speaker and Senate president in, dare I say it, 50 years. And with that knowledge, I'd like to say I don't believe that I think Utah has been extraordinarily well served by those who have served in those roles. But I'd like to say I think that Brad Wilson is among the finest, most talented speakers that Utah has had, who has able to deal with short-term problems and also look to the future. So Brad, with that introduction, how are you going to get us through this one?
Well, thank you, Governor. And I just think we should end the call right after that nice comment you made. But I really do want to thank you, Governor Leavitt, and Taylor Randall, Dean Randall, as well as the Eccles, for the opportunity to participate in this today, and also a few others, and the great value that it's provided for our community. This has been a really difficult time for our state. We've had people who've had illness and had people pass away from this terrible pandemic, a lot of economic challenges in our state. It is amazing to me, though, to see the resiliency of the Utah spirit and the great work that people like Dean Randall have done to help bring our state together. So thank you. I think it's really fun for me to kind of speak towards the end of this conversation today to reflect on a couple of things that I think are important. First of all, the great people that we have, and you've heard from a lot of them, and I've known the three speakers prior well for a long time. Utah is doing exceptionally well. We are in the 90th percentile of states in the country in terms of how our economy is performing in terms of our unemployment rate. Forbes has said that Utah is one of the top 3 states to recover from the downturn that this pandemic is going to bring to our economy. And while no death or illness is acceptable, we're in a better spot, far better spot than we thought we would be 60 days ago. We need to remain vigilant, but we should feel, I think, maybe celebrate some of the great work that's happened over the last 2 months. So, if I could be a little autobiographical for a minute, this is actually my third recession that I've managed since I started a business about 20 years ago. And my readiness level, in terms of business at least, to deal with a recession is much higher than it used to be. Um, we we in my organization, it's hard to do 2, 5, and 10% cuts at the state level, but we had to do about a 20% cut in terms of my business's budget about 30 days ago, and it's really hard to do that. But one thing that I have learned is these external disruptive forces can be something that we can embrace and really see the opportunity that they present for the future of whatever group or industry or area that we are trying to lead. The other thing that I've learned, Governor, is that it's oftentimes easy to overestimate the difficulty and the short term impact of something like this, especially economic downturns. Overestimate the short term impact, but oftentimes people and organizations underestimate the long term implications of events like this. And that's where I think we should be focusing as we do what Dean Randall said. Sorry, I've known him as Taylor for so long. As Dean Randall said at the beginning of the call, what is the state's role in terms of our economic recovery? So government is not an end unto itself. Government and the state of Utah's government is here to help facilitate and support what's in the best interest of the state of Utah and its citizens. And we are going through difficult budget cuts right now. And I think our state agencies are moving through the mourning process and accepting those budget cuts and starting to see the opportunities that these present as we reinvent our state. But the faster we do that, the better off we're going to be as a state in terms of accepting where we're at and pivoting and making the changes that we need to make. My perspective as speaker is this. I've got a few things that I'm filtering all the decisions through that I'm making right now. One is, how do we protect the vulnerable? Representative Romero talked a lot about that. Another is, how do we do targeted cuts to the state budget, not across the board cuts? Also, we need to avoid short-term thinking, short-termism, and really think long-term. Where do we want the state of Utah to be in a decade from now, as well as in a year? And really anchor our thinking and our strategy in that 10-year time frame. And we're going through exercises right now to determine exactly what that might look like. And I want to talk to you about my 3 perspectives on that. Where do we want Utah to be in a decade? And I just kind of would describe this as, how do we relaunch how Utah does business, whether it's in government or education or in business in the state of Utah? And the first thing, and there are 3 R's. The first thing is we need to restart our economy with care. We've got to be very careful about protecting the vulnerable. And at the same time, we need demand for products and services to get back to normal as soon as we can, balancing those 2 things. The second component, Governor, that I would say is we need to reinvent in many ways the Utah economy in this post-COVID world, at the same time ensuring Utah's a very bright future. So the vision that at least I have for the state of Utah is we take advantage of this disruptive time we've got right now and sort of recast our future trajectory of the state. And some elements that I would love to see us really heavily focusing on over the next year or 2, because those are the most critical times as we set this new trajectory, is this rural revival that Wes talked about. How do we close the achievement gap? Tremendous opportunity to think about education differently and closing the achievement gap and tying that into retraining our workforce for the new economy that we expect to live in. I believe that workforce development and closing the achievement gap will be our strategic levers as we move forward if we really take advantage of that moving down the road. There are also some markers of quality of life that I think are easy to forget, but so important that we need to be tending to, whether it's clean air or less congestion on our freeways. We need to have recreation assets for people to go out like Representative Romero did and hike and enjoy the beautiful outdoors that we have. And at the same time, or even maybe most importantly, the underpinning of this needs to be to protect having the most diverse economy in the country, because it unleashes all the opportunities that we're looking for people. So the third area, the third kind of leg of this stool for me is we also need to reinvest in areas of leverage, and especially over the next 12 months. There are certain investments that we can make as a state that I think will create a lot of jobs in the short term, but lay the foundation for the future. Workforce development needs, infrastructure needs, and helping rural Utah with its economic renaissance. So those are some of the things, Governor, that I believe you're going to see us working on. Now, we're going to go into a special session on the 18th and 19th of June. We're going to cut $1 billion or more out of the state budget. But at the same time, we're going to be laying the groundwork for this economic renaissance and revival for the whole state.
Those are very thoughtful comments, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for that. I went through a period while I was governor, and you'll remember this from your place as a business person in 2002, 2003, when we ended up having 6 special sessions of the legislature, every time thinking we had it under control and finding things had changed again. You have some scheduled sessions coming in June or possibly July. Talk to me a little bit about, or talk to us a little bit about the cadence of how you think you'll be managing this, and maybe just a little about this new process that's being used where the legislature's calling themselves into session. How's that going to change things?
Yeah, well, in some ways, Governor, you just described my worst nightmare: 6 special sessions to cut the budget. Hopefully, we're not going to be doing that. We have great economists right now that are doing wonderful work trying to determine what the depth and duration of this recession will be, and hopefully we're going to get it right. And if not, we'll come back and do what you just described. But we will be, as a legislature, kind of focusing on this dual effort over the next who knows how long. 60-day sprints is sort of what I'm thinking of it right now. Managing the state budget, ensuring that we can pay our bills, and at the same time laying the foundation from a policy perspective to pull the right levers and get leverage to rebuild the economy as fast as we can. So, we've got some dates set aside in June, primarily focused on the budget, some policy work. We'll be back in July, focused more on the recovery and some policy efforts. And right now, the legislature, during times of emergency, does have the ability to call itself into special session. I will say this: we recognize the fact, and you'll appreciate this as a former governor, that we're going to be best as a state if we continue doing what we have been doing, which is being united with the executive branch and the legislative branch, linking arms and doing what we think is the best for the state of Utah. But we do, as a legislature, really understand the importance of our role as appropriators and setting a policy. And we have a great relationship with Governor Herbert and his team, and we'll continue to make that happen.
Well, thank you. And I agree with you that what has made Utah fundamentally what it is as a state is the ability for not just its citizens, but its government to work together for the benefit of its citizens. We're now going to go to your turn to ask questions about of our panelists, and the chat line is available. I know that some of you've already made or asked questions. Let's go to Andrea, and what type of questions do we have for our panel members?
Thank you, Governor Leavitt. We're getting a few questions about specifics in the budget cuts around education. There's a lot of concern about cutting education around public health or social services. So specifically, if there are cuts to education, will that be in building projects or salary? And if cuts are made, is there any opportunity to recover cuts for future?
Let's direct that to the speaker.
Thank you. Well, we have about half of the state revenues and about half of the state budget in terms of revenues we generate goes to public education. And so, as we're dealing with a pretty sizable revenue reduction, it's going to be difficult to not go into public education and higher education and find ways we can develop some efficiencies. But the process is the process, and we're letting our committees go right now and figure some of that out. There are certain things that I believe you'll probably see happening through this process. One is one of the principles that I have, at least, and I think you'll see our committees do this, is to give our local districts as much flexibility as they can have during these difficult times. And so they can move money from one bucket to another during kind of unusual circumstances. And that will help, I think, in a lot of ways, deal with some of the short-term issues we face. And then I said earlier in my comments that I believe one of the biggest opportunities we have is closing the achievement gap in workforce development. And so what we're going to need to do is work closely with our education community and the business community and find ways for us to find efficiencies so that we can accomplish those things in difficult times. And sometimes necessity is the mother of invention. And hopefully that's where we end up. But protecting what we call the weighted pupil unit is a high priority of ours. And you'll see that through the process over the next month.
Excellent.
Good, Angela. Another question, and I'll mention we'll like to have comments from others unless the question is directed to a specific person, but feel free, the rest of the panelists, to jump in.
Great.
Angela?
There was a question about several people who received unemployment checks that were often higher than they typically made. There was an example used, one was even 3 times the regular salary. So wanting more information on how these unemployment checks, what's happening there and what are those trends going to look like going forward.
So I'll invite all of you to comment. I will just say it seems likely that what is different here would be the federal pandemic unemployment rate that's going up. Jonathan, do you have any insight into that?
Well, so I will say that one of the things that's different about this economic crisis, I mentioned before, Governor, that we've been practicing for an economic crisis for 5 years at least. We never dreamed that it would be this kind of an economic crisis, right? And the difference about this crisis is it was so immediate and so severe. And we knew immediately that we were in it. In most, as you know from your experience, Governor Levitt, in most recessions, you really don't know until you're halfway through a recession that you're actually even in a recession. We knew up front that this was going to happen, and the federal government responded by trying to stimulate the economy through increased and prolonged unemployment insurance benefits. Those will go away eventually. I do believe that it has changed consumer behavior and it's changed employment market behavior. Some folks probably are making different decisions about going back to work because of it. It does throw a little bit of a monkey wrench in some of our data collection and our normal data patterns because people have changed their habits, their behavior. But it will eventually come to an end, and things will equalize once again. And as our economy often does, the employment market will respond.
Well, thank you. Representative Romeo, do you have any comment on that one, or we can save another one for you?
Thank you, Governor. And I have a lot of constituents who are receiving unemployment, but I can tell you majority of them want to go back to work. They just want to work. And so I think there's a myth behind that as well. I'm not saying that people aren't doing things there. You always have a select few that does, but I think the majority of people, they just want to work. Everyone I talk to, especially with a lot of the restaurants downtown, and I go now and I frequent them, and because I have that privilege too. And a lot of the servers are just happy to be back to work, and they would like to see work increase for many of them. So it's not a choice. I have a 23-year-old who's out of work right now, and he's not getting unemployment because he's still a student too. And so as a parent and as someone who's middle class, I'm having to help him pay his rent. And so this impacts all of us. And so to like target a few people, because they might be getting a little bit more in unemployment. I think that's kind of misguided, my personal opinion, though.
I would like to get Wes Curtis's comment on this. I know that it's been a substantially higher level of unemployment in some of the rural counties, and this the federal pandemic unemployment benefit may in fact be disproportionately felt in rural Utah. Are you seeing evidence of that at all, Wes?
Yes, we are, Governor Levitt. What we're finding, and especially in these tourism-dependent counties where wages are typically quite low anyway, those who go on unemployment insurance are making more money on unemployment than they would be if they were actually employed. And as I've talked to some of the people with the hotels and whatnot, they're saying it's been difficult in some cases to get them to come back to work. So in the effort to help, in some ways we've created a disincentive to work, but this will of course iron itself out over time, and we understand why Congress acted as it did under the circumstances.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question, Andrea.
Yeah, this question's around the rainy day fund. So it was already mentioned that will sequence in at some point. So there's a question about a little bit more detail on why we don't lean on it heavily for important state needs such as education.
I gave Jonathan a chance to comment on this, and he did ably, but let's go to the speaker and ask a few of your thoughts about that.
Thanks, Governor. Well, it is something that's under discussion, and we will use it when the time is right. One of the biggest challenges with the rainy day fund that I don't think a lot of people understand is you really couldn't use it for education, and here's very effectively, and here's why. All of the costs we have in public and higher education, almost all of them, are costs that we call ongoing. They come year after year after year. They're salaries, they're utility bills, they're all the things that we pay every year, every month. Our rainy day funds are relatively small compared to those ongoing expenses, and our rainy day funds are just one-time savings accounts. So you would never want to start paying someone's salary out of an account that you're not going to have in 6 months. And so we've got to right size our budgets for these ongoing expenses with the ongoing revenue. And then we can use that one-time money for deficits in the short term if we have them. But we just got to kind of right size our revenue and expenditures that are ongoing together.
Well, thank you. And thanks to all of our panelists today. We have hosted now, I think this is the 14th forum in this series. This has been viewed by an audience that I think is approaching nearly 20,000 Utah business people and citizens. We've heard from headliners like Speaker Wilson and Randy Quarles of the Federal Reserve and Mark Zandia, who is with Moody's. This has been an extraordinarily useful thing, and I want to thank the Eccles Foundation and the Eccles School of Business for the privilege of being involved in it and all of the value that it has been presented. I would also like to conclude my part by maybe reflecting a bit on what I have learned from these 14 forums, hearing from Utahns in every corner of the state and in many industries and sectors. There are 6 words that appear to me as being things I have observed and learned. The first is the importance of balance through the course of this event. We're having to balance the need for us to act as a group in doing things like shutting businesses down. That was a hard thing. We had to give things up, and we did, and it had an impact. We're now having to act in our individual capacity to open up the governments, to open up the businesses. Balancing these two for a period of time will be a critical part of the way we come through this. The second thing I've learned is, or observed, is resilience. The people of this state remain resilient. They remain resourceful, and we are getting through this. The third would be adaptive. We have seen every part of our state pulled together to adapt. We've seen businesses, we've seen schools, we've seen nonprofits finding ways now to open up and to provide the services, but recognizing how important it is still that that this virus is with us. It is a new risk, and we're having to adapt to that new risk. The next would be innovate. There's a spirit of innovation that is blowing across the state right now, in some ways as a result of necessity. We have seen products invented. We've seen entirely new businesses spring up. Like any crisis, this is a moment when there will be a profound amount of new business development because people need to do it. And that necessity is the mother of invention is playing out, and it plays out big in Utah. The fifth one would be collaborate. We are a state that's working together. That point's been made, but it can't be underscored enough. It will require collaboration for us to work together, to work through these problems, but we will, because that's the Utah tradition. And the last thing I'll say is change. This is a pandemic. It is a historic fact that these come. They come seldom enough that we forget how profound they are in shaping the world. They shape the economy, they reshape the sociology, and they reshape even the politics. We have no choice but to embrace change at a moment like this. As I have often said, when it comes to that kind of change, you can fight it and die. You'll be overcome by events. You can accept it, have a chance, or you can lead it and prosper. That's my personal motto, and I leave it with you today as a testament of how we get through this together. So with that, I'm going to turn back to Dean Randall. Thanks again for allowing me to join with you as part of this, and I'd like to hear more about what we're going to do now.
Well,
Thank you.
Governor Levitt, I'm going to just jump in real quick and say thanks also. I appreciate it. Your team's been amazing, and partnering with the David Eccles School of Business and the Mariner Eccles Institute for Economic and Quantitative Analysis, and under our father's leadership, the Eccles family. The summary was amazing. The panelists have been incredible today and past ones. You'll recall, just as we think back, March 11th, the NBA shut down. Schools closed on March 15th, and oh yes, let's not forget a 5.7 earthquake on March 18th. The coronavirus's shutdown brought crushing uncertainty and brought the entire world economy to an immediate and screeching halt. An incredible volume of information poured in, sometimes conflicting and ever changing, which added to the confusion and uncertainty that you mentioned. There was no CARES Act at the time, no color-coded roadmap, and what this journey looked like, and no certainty as to the depth, breadth, or duration of this pandemic spreading across the globe. As a family, we wondered how we could quickly assist Utah businesses in both large and small in every sector and every corner of our state. In talking with Dean Randall of the Business School and you, Governor Levitt, and within a few days, we created and launched this Navigating COVID-19, How to Save Your Business executive education. The goal was to provide immediate assistance to business leaders and to help them reframe the daunting economic landscape facing them, and sharing actionable, timely tools that they could immediately implement in their businesses. We knew businesses needed to get their foot on a rock, as my dad likes to say, and move forward. As a team, we knew that our business leaders were resilient, and we believed that this guidance could enable them to navigate this unprecedented crisis with greater confidence and success. It was a perfect fit to host this series through the Mariner Eccles Institute and tap into the incredibly talented professors housed in it. Mariner set the example for all of us when he too faced a monumental crisis and led his family's companies, created by his father David, through the challenges of the late 1920s that is, and then as chairman of the Federal Reserve, where he led the country through the Great Depression in the 1930s. Additionally, Governor Levitt, having your vision and your leadership in this incredibly fluid environment has been vital. You provided invaluable perspective and understanding gained as the governor of Utah and later as the head of Health and Human Services, where you developed the country's pandemic plan under President George W. Bush, a $7.5 billion budget, I might add. Over the course of the past 2.5 months, these seminars have addressed issues facing multiple businesses and industry sectors, from education to sports, as you mentioned, Governor, nonprofits to restaurants, retail, and small businesses. We've worked to provide actionable tools to help shore up Utah businesses in our communities. We have been especially grateful for the incredible business leaders and policy leaders, such as we had today, that have graciously shared your time and experience and thoughts throughout the series to give us real boots on the ground examples of how to navigate this crisis. In order to execute on this effort, we had the support of the George S. and Dolores Dory Eccles Foundation, who graciously underwrote this effort to eliminate barriers and ensure that every Utahn could benefit from these amazing experts. The results have been far-reaching. As Governor Levitt mentioned, over the past 2.5 months, we had over 21 planning meetings, 14 segments in total, and up to about 20,000 views, including today. One thing we know, and that I personally experienced as head of the Governor's Office of Economic Development through the Great Recession, is that Utah is an amazing place with incredible people who work together to simply get things done. We've heard a lot of that today, both on the policy side and in the past through businesses. Utahns care about their community, their neighbors, and their families. Things are challenging today, but together we can beat the pandemic crisis and bring our businesses and communities through it. And because of the way we work together, we are already witnessing Utah's leadership in the nation as we lead the country once again through this current crisis. We have seen tough times before, but importantly, as a state and as a people, we will adapt. And you heard the word innovate from the governor and pivot from the speaker as we look to grow out of this. This is a process, not an event. And there are brighter days ahead of us as we work to rebuild our businesses and reactivate our communities. I just personally, on behalf of our family, like to thank everyone who has made this series possible, and for all of you, our attendees. And we're grateful for you. We hope that this series and the ideas shared here will help you along into the future as you create jobs, care for your employees, provide services for Utahns and visitors, and energize our state. Thanks for all you do every day to make Utah great. Dean Randall, I'll turn the time back to you, and thank you for your leadership.
Spencer, thanks for those closing remarks of this series, and thanks to your family and the George S. and Dolores Dory Eccles Foundation. Governor Levitt, it's been a pleasure to have you as our host as we've had this series. We're going to be pivoting ourselves. The Mariner S. Eccles Institute will be providing periodic updates on the COVID crisis and the economic crisis that accompanies it. Our next update will occur on Friday, June 26th. The faculty of this institute have been involved in a detailed economic study that includes the effect of COVID in our smaller communities. They'll be providing a first glance at the results of that study. We hope you'll join us on June 26th. Thank you, viewers, for being with us this last 2.5 months. We appreciate you. And as always, keep your wits about you. We're getting through this together. Thank you.